when you hear the words Missouri University, well, I don't know if it's University of Missouri,
University of Missouri,
but the Tigers in Columbia, Missouri, what are some of the things that come to your mind based on the recent unrest that we've seen at that specific academic institution?
Well, listen, I mean, this is a very hot button issue nowadays, and we're in the height of we're entering into the height of this political campaign, and everything kind of gets thrown in together. And I tell you what, man, my initial approach to a lot of things that are digested from the public perspective, I approach them very, very carefully and very thoughtfully. But like many people, I was very proud and pleased to see what the students on the campus did in terms of coming together as one and having specific demands and being successful in getting those demands met. I know that there's a very low percentage of African American students on that campus, and so to be able to be in a position of a smaller percentage of students on campus, but being able to affect such a powerful change, and not only impacted the institution, but the board of regents, or at least the board for the institution, as well as just the nation, is nothing small. And I'm a college professor as well, and I had just kind of a brief conversation with my students and to get their reaction and their sense of what this means. And it was a lot of different responses about what happens next. There were some responses about the threats to the lives of these African American students, and saying that many people don't refuse to acknowledge or recognize the struggle. One of the points that I made to them, because these are students and these are their peers, that I made the point that there's so much you can do when you act as a unit and as a body.
Yes.
And no matter how small your numbers are, no matter how insignificant you may think you are, but with anything can be achieved with a small, dedicated group of people. And you can change the world with a small, dedicated group of people, because, in fact, that's the only thing that ever has changed the world, is a small, dedicated group of people. And so, I mean, I think that's an object lesson not only for them but for everyone. And so I'm happy to see that. I'm very proud of that. And, of course, when you open up when you really look into it and you get beyond the just political punditry and just the national discourse that tends to only go at a very shallow level, we don't really look in detail and in depth in a lot of these issues. It is very clear that the football team was the catalyst to really bring this to the national stage. I'll never forget, Sunday night, Monday morning, that's what was on ESPN. So if you're watching football, they timed it perfectly where, it's highlights of sports. And by the way, Missouri's football team is protesting. And what are they protesting for? And so not only do people band together, but when you band together and you can combine the power of the purse, which this football team clearly had the power of the purse, saying that we were not going to be the money-making machine for this football team until you recognize and address our concerns, then, great things happen. And so, I'm happy about that. I am disappointed that it's taken on a kind of very distasteful national discussion around race relations, which so many things have in the past. When you think of Ferguson and so many other issues national over this past year that have happened in race relations, it doesn't seem to enter into a place of discourse that's going to be helpful to the country. But it's just, it turns into what headline can you get, what 140 character phrase can you put together that will turn heads but not really talk about substantive issues. And that's what it's unfortunate that it's getting to now. But I think a lot of people, especially students, are around the country are impacted and realizing, hey, we have a voice. If we move together, if we band together, we can get something done.
Yeah, I think, Jeremy, this topic is so I find this specific topic fascinating on many levels. For our podcast, I think it's interesting because we've been expanding our format into not just discussing sports, but talking about things that are relevant to our age group, talking about things that are relevant to Christians. And this topic first really shows how impactful sports are and how it's really not that difficult to disentangle sports from pop culture and what's going on with life, because it was really the football team that was the catalyst for the ultimate change. For those just listening, kind of tuning in, if you've been under a rock the last several days, there's been a terrible situation at the University of Missouri. They've had a culture of racism where students have been slurred. Their administration seemingly looked the other way. There had been some people calling for the president to resign. It had gotten to such a bad situation there. The president was adamant about he had no intention of leaving his post. The football team banded together as about 35 young gentlemen. They banded together and they said, we will not play until this president is not in this role anymore. We will not support this president. We don't care about the scholarship. The scholarship is not worth our dignity. We're willing to risk losing the scholarship. We're willing to risk whatever anger and vitriol could be aimed at us. But we won't play. We won't play as long as this individual is in the power. Within less than 48 hours from the students making that stand, that president was no longer in power. And I think it's so interesting on many levels because, in my opinion, Jeremy, this is a textbook case study on how to handle racial injustice. Had these young people burned the school down, had there been a riot, had they started burning stuff and had it gotten violent, a violent type of protest, we all know what would have happened. The police would have come in there. Yeah, they would have tased everybody. They would have shot and killed a couple of people. It would have been a national thing. Al Sharpton would have been standing out in front of Missouri University.
Well, I don't know if Al Sharpton would be anymore, but maybe if it was last year, it would have been Al Sharpton. He's kind of fallen from grace, but that's a whole other story. Right. But it would have been riots. It would have been the media would have called it riots. Mayhem. Hoodlums, gangster. That's what the media would have said. Exactly. Right. You're right.
But instead of doing that, these educated, strong brothers, strong young black men, they banded together and they said, you know what? We're the engine that drives the bus here. The success on the Missouri Tigers brand is based on our talent. It's based on our athleticism. It's based on us being a team. I believe Missouri was, if I'm not mistaken, they went to the SEC championship just last year. They've been in the SEC for a few years, and they've been very successful since moving over from the Big 12 to the SEC. These gentlemen decided that it just wasn't worth it, and they were not going to be used to empower people who believed that they were less than a man, who believed that they should be treated as someone who's not equal. And I applaud these young men for putting their dignity over a scholarship, because my dignity is not for sale. I don't care if somebody gives me, I don't care if it's a Super Bowl ring, I don't care if it's a Lombardi trophy, I don't care if it's a Larry O'Brien trophy, I don't care if it's a promotion at my job. My dignity is not for sale. And that's such a great lesson for these young men to give, not just internally in the build amongst each other, but that's a great lesson. I mean, you have three young children. I don't have any children, but if I had young children, I would put them in front of the TV and I would say, that's how you handle when someone mistreats you because of the color of your skin.
Right. And let me also just say too, and just kind of put in perspective, the difficulty of what they did, because we look at it, we read stories, we read about the protests, civil rights movement, the marches, and Rosa Parks and not giving up her seat and all of these types of things. And we look at it with the with 2020 vision and with the comfort of knowing how the story ends, how the tape plays to the end. It is easy to do. It is easier to do the right thing when you know that you're going to be rewarded for it. It's harder to do the right thing when you're going to be maligned for it and you don't know what the result is going to be. They didn't know. I mean, this could have gone a different direction. The president could have said, "I'm not leaving, and you all will lose your scholarship. We will tank the football program for a year and build it up and get rid of it and get a whole new squad." I mean, they were potentially up against losing. For some of them, losing opportunities a shot at the NFL, losing scholarship, losing an education, and so it's so
right.
Easy
you're talking
for
about more than $100K worth of value, full room and board. For 4
right,
years,
exactly.
Between
for 4 years,
$150,000. Yeah.
And you're putting that on, and not just the football players, but the students as well. You know, I mean, I don't know the students' positions and so forth, but it is not an easy thing to put on. To risk your comfort, your routine, and no matter what it is much harder to put that up against the tumultuous uncertainty of what happens next when you point your finger in someone's eye that you know deserves it. So I'm more proud. I'm proud of a lot of things, but proud of the fact that they stood up and said, even though we don't know how this is going to play out, we're going to stand on principle. There's something I want to address one other thing though, if I can, and it's kind of like on the flip side of this because we're seeing in the narrative, of course, I talked about it at the top about the political spectrum and how, Trump came out and talked about. He talked, his whole thing. The leaders were weak for stepping down, all these types of things.
So Jeremy, what I'm gonna do if I could jump in, we're gonna jump in and take a break, and then we're gonna go to a couple commercials, and then we'll be back on the Lance J Radio Show talking about the Missouri Tigers and the 35 soldiers, the young men that took a stand and said they would not allow racist individuals to control them. Back in a couple seconds on the Lance J Radio Show.
Hey everybody, this is Coach Eric Cantrell. I am the athletic director and the head coach for boys basketball at Pine Forge Academy, located in Pine Forge, Pennsylvania. And I'm listening to the Lance J Radio Show on Advent Sports Network.
So just when I was about to write the Indianapolis Colts off after having a disastrous season, which culminated in possibly the most embarrassing play call in the history of the NFL, where they ran a fake punt that started with the third string wide receiver snapping the ball to the third string safety. The Colts actually showed some signs of life.
Hold up. Let me ask, what was that about, man? Did you ever get an answer like what? Because I think about that every day. Like every day.
You think about it every day? So you think about every day.
It was the most absurd. It was the most absurd play in the history of the NFL. I mean, everybody moved out the way. I mean, really, there's no logic.
You put your beautiful daughter down, and you help your oldest daughter with her homework. You're out doing stuff for Central State, getting your chorale groups together, going over music, spending time with your family. And you're saying every day through all of that.
Every day. It's every day. A thought comes to my mind, and I just pause and I look up in the air and I think, what was Pagano thinking, man?
Sports talk, ministry, excellence. You are listening to the Lance J Radio Show. You're on the ticket with Advent Sports Network, home of Falcon Pride, One-on-One with MJ, and the Lance J Radio Show.
We are back on the Lance J Radio Show. I've been having a very empowering and inspirational discussion with Jeremy about the Missouri Tigers football team and how they had gentlemen who were willing to put their scholarships and potential livelihood on the line that would not play for a university that supported and enabled a culture of perpetual racism. And Jeremy was going into some really good points about the strength of these young men and how this is so much more relevant than just some individuals taking a stand, but kind of has some bigger undertones. So I wanted to let Jeremy kind of finish his point.
Yeah, the point is, I mean, unfortunately, we're in this day of heightened political rhetoric and people trying to draw lines in the sand. And, this University of Missouri issue is another opportunity for America to try to divide itself once again. And people try to run to their corners and say why the other person was wrong. Trump says in the media that he said that the leaders were weak, so to speak, and that they should not have done it. I think he said it was unacceptable and just terrible. All of his adjectives that he used to describe everybody except himself. And Ben Carson too, yeah, and Ben Carson as well, who said that
just take it, just take the racial slur.
I can't remember what he said, but it was very clear that he was. He wasn't supporting it, and that's. I think that is disappointing, but unfortunately, that's to be expected when you're running for this office.
Right.
But the point I want to make for anyone who is questioning the motives and feeling like this was an unjust resolution, that this president should have been fired because there was some vagueness on what the students were going through. I just want to make a point that, being an African American in most environments in this country, there's so many instances of subtle racism and
yes.
being dismissed without maybe using a racial slur or calling somebody a name to their face. There are very, very clear examples, and I'm sure you've got a ton of stories. I've got a ton of stories. I'm in Ohio. I'm in an environment where I'm in the minority outside of my work, but in the community and so forth, I am the minority 90% of the time. There are many instances where people look at you and they wonder why you are where you are, and should you be here? Are you a threat? This is and all of these types of things that we've learned how to adapt to and brush it off. And I think to be successful in America, you're going to have to learn, as an African American male, you're going to have to learn how to adapt to these unfortunate realities and ignorance.
You can't be thin-skinned.
He can't be thin-skinned. I mean, if somebody's, if something happens that you know people are responding to you, or the atmosphere changes because you're the only African-American in the room, and all of a sudden you're going to become uncomfortable, you can't deal with that, then that's going to be a problem, because that's American. We have to learn how to address that. However, I do feel I want those who have questioned, if you have any listeners who question the motives of these students, that you have to understand, living in a community, in a society that, in their case at the University of Missouri, that dismissed their concerns over and over again. You may think, oh, well, somebody called you the N-word one day. Is that worthy of the president of being fired? But if that happens one day and it's brought to the president's attention and he brushes it off, and then something else happens, it's brought to somebody's attention, they brush it off. Eventually, they're not brushing off the incident, they're brushing off your concerns and the thing that you value. And the fact of the matter, these students are paying tens of thousands of dollars to be there, and if they're not being heard, it is their responsibility to make sure that their voices are heard. These leaders had an opportunity to address their issues, and it is the responsibility, I think, of all humans, of all life, to be able to stand up and say, there comes a point where no matter how subtle your discrimination, how subtle your insults are, there comes a point where it is no longer going to be accepted. And the president had many opportunities to do that, and he chose not to address it in a meaningful way. And maybe he didn't know how to address it. Maybe it was something so foreign to him that he didn't know how to address these issues. But then that to me says he was unfit to be the president of a college that had African Americans there if he did not know how to address it. So in any way, no matter how we measure it up, it may make you uncomfortable, may make people uncomfortable because this happened, but you have to deal with the discomfort that so many other Americans, African Americans, male and female alike, have been dealing with both subtly and directly in their face for so many years. And so I feel no sense of remorse for anyone who is disappointed in this, because if you're disappointed, it is likely that you have not had to deal with these types of situations.
Let's just call facts facts. I mean, Missouri is rooted in racism. I mean, it's a part of the culture. I mean, there's the 3/5 compromise that was in the Constitution is called the Missouri Compromise. It says that a black man is only 3/5 of a person. That's that's a part of the tapestry that is American history. Facts are just facts, and I think your opinion is very important, Jeremy, because you're an educator. I went to school at Miami University, which is in Oxford, Ohio, about 45 miles north of Cincinnati, right on the Indiana border, and I was slurred on at least 4 occasions in the year and a half that I was there. I was slurred coming out of my apartment, or someone would drive by, call me the N-word. I've been slurred coming out of Walmart getting groceries in the same fashion. Someone hung a noose from a tree at one of the not the primary hall that I went to class in, but someone hung a noose from a tree at Miami University while I was there, and this was back in 2006, before we were really in that true people could just grab a cell phone and take pictures, and you have that constant media cycle. I mean, back in 2006, if you and I wanted to discuss this, we would actually have to have a professional radio show forum. Now we're able to just use a phone call. I'm in Seattle, you're in Dayton. We can talk about this and post it and generate, some conversation. Things were different, but I'm just saying from my own experience, this stuff is real, man. It's not made up. It's not something that's fabricated. There are places in this country and there are institutions where racism and feeling that it's okay to look down upon, and not just African Americans, people of Jewish heritage, people who are Hispanic, people who are Asian. There is a lot of hate swirling around at various institutions of higher learning, and to expose those who allow this culture and protect people that want to intimidate and harass individuals just because the color of their skin. I have absolutely no sympathy for those individuals to get their comeuppance.
And I would just also say, and this is a part where it gets exceedingly emotional for me, is to imagine when you have kids. You know, I mean, and so it's one thing to deal with something on your own. You kind of learn, your experience teaches you, okay, this is how you adjust. But then you have children that now have to grow up and deal with these same, learn the history and deal with the realities that people are going to look and think differently about them simply because of the color of their skin. But having to teach them that they're going to have to rise above that. That it's going to be frustrating, it's going to be angering for them, it's going to hurt their feelings, but they have to rise above that. And as a parent, listen, it goes from any tolerance, if there was ever any tolerance, to absolutely no tolerance whatsoever. And I can't imagine if those were my children at University of Missouri who felt that they were being discriminated against. I mean, I would set up camp out there. I know I would be out there at least every day, every other day, addressing these issues, because it's easy to speak in theory and say, well, if I were this, if I were that, or if my child these people are just complaining. That's what I hear a lot on the right wing pundits saying. But they realize that that's a reality that they will never, or neither their children will never have to experience. Most of them, and so it's easy to take a position that is absurd, insensitive, and unwilling to identify with the anger and the frustration that creates. So, but I'm glad that we are where we are in this day, and I'm glad that the country is being forced to face these frustrating, these difficult situations.
Yeah, I would make a call as we close the segment. I'll give you the last word, but I really feel there are going to be some people that listen that aren't going to like what I'm about to say. But my brothers and sisters, African Americans, and I don't cater to African American people only. I believe that we're all the same. We're all children of God. This is a Christian network, a Christian program. But we got to stop. When we see injustice, we gotta stop torching stuff and getting arrested and getting shot, because that doesn't get anyone out of power. What gets people out of power is when you see people who are disenfranchising you because of your race, and you refuse to allow them to make another nickel off of your greatness. And that's one of the ways that you're able to evoke some type of change. Because if you go into the violence and the anger and all of that stuff, all that does is that gives the media an opportunity to make African Americans look like savages, which is something that the media thrives off of, perpetuating that image of African Americans.
Listen, man, that's you're opening up such another big can of worms. So many things are connected to this. I appreciate you having this topic on this show, and I hope that
real talk.
I hope that people will really post and run into the discussion. As we look at this situation, and then we look at the landscape in this across the country, where we're about to see the outgoing of the first African American president, and we've had a flurry of racially tense issues, and quite frankly, I think situations that still exposed the bias against African Americans, and quite frankly, just a dislike for many African Americans, while allowing them to be treated so poorly and just outright abused by so many. But we have to go deeper than just the surface politics and surface discussion that you get off of Facebook, that you get off of some of these sites that are only trying to sap our emotion. Unfortunately, just like what we see with University of Missouri students, results happen when people actually put foot to the ground, pencil to paper, and actually get out of the comfort zone, shut down the computer, shut off your phone, and actually start moving and taking some risks. And and unfortunately, I think media is sapping. They see the opportunity of anger in the community, justified anger, justified issues, and so forth, and then they sap the emotion out of the community by trying to post, well, this is what happened, this is what this person said, and get a whole another community riled up, and it goes by 3 days and it's over. We have to go beyond that and not even let the candidates try to cater to, but actually talk about substantive issues and how we're going to get things done. And I think, again, it's just a great testament to what can be done when you get on the same everyone gets on the same vision about what needs to happen, which we saw happen at the University of Missouri.
Advent Sports Network is a 503c charity. All advertising proceeds from the Lance J Radio Show are used to fund nationwide youth sports programs and the Advent Sports Network Mentorship and Development Institute, which provides opportunities for young aspiring Christian journalists to cover athletic events and produce sports-related programming.